It was a Thursday when the letter came. Not an email. Not a text. An actual letter, on real stationery with raised floral corners and her signature. That fancy cursive Amelia always used when she was trying to be impressive. Dinner at Grandma's. Sunday, 6 p.m. Family only. No love, Amelia. No smiley face or fake warmth. Just that flat sentence and a return address I hadn't seen in 7 years. Chesterville, Virginia. Still the same town I left behind, and had no intention of seeing again. I stood in my barracks staring at it for too long. The ink felt heavier than it should have. My roommate, Captain Teresa Langford, glanced over and whistled. "You look like you just got summoned by the IRS," she said. "Worse," I muttered. "Family dinner." She laughed. "Deploy me to Fallujah again. I'd rather do that than sit through mine." I shoved the letter in my locker. Figured I'd ignore it. But something kept pulling at me. Maybe it was the handwriting. Or maybe it was the guilt I didn't want to admit I still carried around like a second uniform. The last time I saw Amelia, she didn't say goodbye. She didn't hug me when I left for basic. Didn't write. Didn't call. After our father died, she stepped in for Mom, took care of the house, handled the estate, and stayed in Chesterville while I went off to chase stripes and stars. Everyone called me the Golden Daughter. I knew better. I was the one who ran. By Saturday, I'd decided. I didn't owe them anything, but I could spare one night. I filed leave with OSDI, arranged private transport, and packed one civilian outfit. Clean, plain, boring, no medals, no indication of anything. I'd been trained to disappear into a crowd. Doing that around your own blood is just another skill. The first thing I noticed stepping off the bus was how small the town felt. Chesterville hadn't changed, but it looked like it had shrunken. Same gas station, same church. Same town square where people who peaked in high school pretended they hadn't. I took a cab to Grandma's. The driver looked at me like I was either lost or rich. I wasn't either. When we pulled up, I saw Amelia's cruiser parked in front. Clean, polished. A little too perfectly placed. The chief of police seal on the door had her name on it. So she made it. The town finally gave her the badge. Good for her. I rang the doorbell. Grandma answered. Slower than I remembered, but still sharp. She smiled, pulled me into a hug and whispered, "Don't rise to it, sweetheart." I hadn't said a word. Inside, the house smelled the same. Cinnamon, pot roast, lemon pledge. There was a new chandelier in the dining room, probably Amelia's touch. She always hated the old one. I nodded to everyone. Some cousins. A couple aunts. Mom. She looked tired. Not old, just worn. Amelia stood next to her, arms crossed, tight bun, badge on her hip like a prize. "Look who decided to show up," she said, not even trying to fake nice. I smiled. "Good to see you too, Chief." A couple heads turned. She didn't like that. The table was set for 12. Amelia sat at the head. Grandma used to. Now she was tucked at the far end like a guest. No one said it out loud, but the shift was clear. Dinner hadn't started yet, but tension had. Amelia kept glancing my way like I was a stain she couldn't bleach out. I played dumb. I asked about people's kids. I passed the rolls. I complimented the potatoes. But then I noticed something. The PI. He was there. Not as a guest. Just outside. Across the street. Pretending to walk a dog that didn't sniff anything. I leaned back in my chair, chewed slow. Something was off. Teresa always said, "The more civilian it looks, the more military it smells." I kept eating. No reason to let anyone see me blink first. I caught Amelia's eyes again. This time, she didn't look angry. She looked satisfied. Like someone who'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. She poured herself a glass of wine, tapped her fork against it like it was a wedding toast, and said, "Before we eat, I have a little something to share." I didn't flinch. Didn't speak. She stood. Everyone else kept eating. Grandma looked down, and I stayed still. Because I already knew this wasn't dinner, this was a setup. But I'd been trained for worse ambushes than this. I didn't move. Not when she stood. Not when she cleared her throat. Not when Mom glanced at me like I was supposed to say something. Instead, I reached for my glass of water, took a sip, and leaned back like I had all night. Because if this was going to be public, I'd make damn sure I stayed calm in public. Amelia smiled. Not warm, Not soft. The kind of smile people give you when they've already decided they're better than you and they're about to prove it. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming," she said. "It's been a while since we were all under the same roof." A few murmurs of agreement, forks tapping on plates. Grandma didn't look up. "But before we eat," she continued, "there's something I need to address. Something important." Her voice shifted. The crowd didn't notice, but I did. It was the same tone I'd heard officers use during disciplinary briefings. Controlled, performed, rehearsed. She opened a folder. She actually brought a folder to dinner. Printed papers, photos, sealed evidence bags. "This," she said, holding one up, "is a copy of a federal form, an application for military ID credentials." Cousin Miles blinked. Are we doing show and tell now?" Amelia ignored him. She was focused, locked in. "This application," she continued, "was submitted under the name Lillian Caldwell. It includes a forged DD 214, a falsified deployment record, and a fabricated clearance level. And it was used to obtain benefits through the Department of Defense, including housing, stipend payments, and transport access." A beat of silence. Then Mom whispered, "What?" Amelia looked at me, full eye contact. "I'm placing you under arrest, Lillian, for impersonating a federal officer and theft of government property." The room froze. I kept my hand on the glass. No one spoke. Then Aunt Maggie gasped. I looked at Amelia. "Are you serious?" Her hand was already on the cuffs. "Turn around." Grandma stood up. "Amelia, what are you doing?" "This is official," she snapped. "She's not who you think she is." I didn't resist. I stood slowly. She came around the table, pulled my arms behind me, and cuffed me like a rookie doing a training exercise. Too tight. On purpose. "She's lying." I heard someone whisper. "No," Amelia said. "She's been lying." I scanned the room. No one moved. No one stepped in. Not even Mom. She just sat there, mouth slightly open, hands limp in her lap. I turned my head slightly and said, "You really think I forged a 20-year military career?" Amelia didn't answer. She pulled the badge off her belt and held it up like she needed to remind everyone who had authority. "You've never told anyone where you worked," she said. "You disappeared. You show up with money, private drivers, security clearances, and you expect us to just believe it?" "I didn't ask you to believe anything." "No," she said. "You didn't. That's the problem." Her voice cracked just a little. No one else caught it. "I did. This wasn't about justice. This was about jealousy. And maybe something more." She shoved the folder toward the table. "Everything you need is right here. This isn't personal. It's legal." "Then why didn't you call JAG?" I asked. She froze. "You know damn well stolen valor is a military matter, not a local police issue." Amelia looked at the room, then back at me. "You broke federal law. I have jurisdiction. You think that's how jurisdiction works?" I almost laughed. But I didn't, because I could feel the blood leaving my wrists. The cuffs were digging in deeper. She wanted it to hurt. Fine. Let her think she won. Let her perform. I kept my mouth shut, my spine straight, my chin level. The training wasn't just for war zones. It was for moments like this. I looked at Grandma. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't say a word. That told me everything. Amelia stepped back. She was breathing heavier than before. "I'll be contacting the state attorney's office after this. You'll be transported in the morning," she said. No one knew what to say. Then I heard a phone snap a photo. Probably Uncle Ray. Always had to document the drama. Amelia didn't stop him. I just stood there, cuffed, humiliated, and still not saying a damn word. Across the street, the guy walking the fake dog was still pretending to pick up poop. That wasn't a neighbor. That wasn't a coincidence. I shifted my weight slightly, enough to press my hip back into the edge of my belt. Just enough pressure to activate the signal. It vibrated once. Confirmed. And I kept my eyes straight ahead, like none of it mattered. The cuffs were tight enough to make my fingers tingle, but I didn't flinch. I'd had worse. Sand, sweat, blisters, 20-hour debriefs. Pain was never the point. Pain was just part of the noise. The point was control. And Amelia thought she had it. What she didn't know was that 3 weeks before that dinner, She'd broken into my rental property in Arlington. She didn't do it herself, of course. She paid someone else low-level PI, no license outside Virginia, the kind of guy who thinks opening a deadbolt qualifies as surveillance work. He used a fake utilities badge to get inside, claimed he was checking wiring for code violations, slipped past the landlord by dropping my name, said I had military connections, and he was just there, on her request. No one asked questions. The attic was locked with biometric access, but the backup manual override was still in place. I left it for emergencies. He found it, clicked it open, and that's when the panic set in. Inside the attic were storage crates, government-issued, triple-tagged, locked, marked with barcodes and numeric codes that if you actually knew what you were looking at were completely legal and matched Department of Defense transport documentation. But to someone like him, to someone like Amelia, it looked like evidence. He took photos, opened one of the crates, found encrypted drives, deployment manuals, and sealed black pouches marked Field Notes Classified. One even had Arabic scribbles on the label. He sent everything to Amelia that night. And to be fair, if you hated me enough and had no military clearance, you might believe what he believed, that I was running a stolen valor op, that I was sitting on a pile of fake materials to boost some made-up resume, that I was playing soldier with real weapons. Amelia didn't question the PI's methods. She didn't verify chain of custody, didn't check the documentation, didn't notify federal authorities. She just printed everything, organized it into a folder, and rehearsed a speech for family dinner. I know this because 2 days before the dinner, the PI's assistant, who apparently had a conscience, sent a redacted email to my OSDI field office. The subject line was, "Potential compromise, Caldwell family." It reached Fort Claiborne the next morning, but by then I was already en route. And since my own records were flagged under sealed operations, the review process took time. They didn't connect the dots until after I'd already stepped into Grandma's house. Amelia thought she was building a case. What she was actually doing was tampering with federal intelligence materials. And not just any materials. The crates in the attic weren't mine. They belonged to a cross-agency strike unit that had just completed a classified overseas recovery. I'd been tasked with custody during the transfer window. The mistake was thinking I could keep them secured at a private site for 48 hours. That was my call. And now it was a federal headache. Not because Amelia had proof of wrongdoing, but because she'd accidentally exposed something she couldn't possibly understand. From her point of view, she was the hero. She saw me as the sister who disappeared, who got the spotlight, who never told the truth, who returned home with nothing to show for her stories but cash, scars, and secrets. She assumed the worst. And in her mind, she was protecting the family. Which is why she didn't blink when she broke the law. She thought she was saving face. Except she had no clue what she'd just stepped into. The PI tried to warn her. The night before the dinner, he sent her a voicemail. "Look, I don't know what your sister's into, but this stuff doesn't feel right. Maybe leave it alone." She deleted it. She wasn't backing off now. She had a folder, a captive audience, and 2 decades of resentment bottled up in that police uniform. And once she locked those cuffs, she felt like she won. But the signal I triggered had already left the house. The vibration on my belt confirmed a GPS ping and a priority alert routed through Fort Claiborne's internal channel. They wouldn't send a full team right away. They'd confirm identity first. They'd review protocols. Someone would get briefed. An officer would be assigned. Still, the process had started. My face stayed neutral. Amelia was pacing now, giving a speech about honor and the law and consequences. I wasn't listening. I was thinking about the attic, and how she had no idea what those crates really contained. Not even the PI opened the second layer of containers. If he had, he would have found biometric readers, encrypted laptops, and intel files that hadn't even been decrypted by OSDI yet. One of those files was a record from an extraction in Jordan. It involved names some American, some not. It was raw, sensitive, unfiltered. The fact that a civilian had touched any of it was already a problem. The fact that Amelia had printed pieces of it and brought them to a family dinner, that was felony territory. But none of that mattered to her. Not now. Not in her eyes. To Amelia, this was her chance to finally expose me. She saw it as justice. I saw it as something else entirely. Because the more she talked, the more she told on herself. Not legally, emotionally. This wasn't about law enforcement. It was about family, about old wounds, about control, about someone who stayed and hated that I left, about someone who buried her resentment in responsibility, about someone who couldn't stand that I became something she couldn't define. She didn't need truth. She needed to win. And she thought she just had. I kept my eyes forward, letting her voice fade into the background noise, the way I used to when air raid sirens blared during debriefs in Kandahar. Noise was fine. Noise meant I wasn't being touched. 3 days before the dinner, I was sitting across from Dr. Jacob Grant, base therapist, 50-something Navy vet, sharp enough to smell deflection before I opened my mouth. "You're back stateside. Final assignment wrapped. Any reason you're still requesting ops-level clearance?" he asked, flipping through my file without looking up. "I prefer not to get rusty," I said. "You've spent 14 out of the last 16 years in active intelligence. Rust is not your problem." He was right. Fatigue was. He tapped the desk. "Nightmares? Number. Flashbacks? Number. Do you jump when a door slams? Only if it's attached to a drone." He smiled at that, but I didn't. He leaned forward. "Let me guess. You're requesting field retention because you don't know what the hell to do with yourself unless someone's depending on you to keep secrets." I said nothing. He nodded. That's what I thought. He was wrong about one thing, though. It wasn't the secrets that kept me grounded. It was the silence. Being invisible gave me control. Talking made everything messier. I hadn't planned to speak at the dinner. I didn't want to defend myself to a room full of people who already decided I was the family disappointment dressed in military cosplay. People like Amelia didn't want the truth. They wanted proof they were right. But therapy taught me something. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's the only leverage you've got left. Grant closed my file. "You need to confront what you've been avoiding. Go see them, not for them for you." He meant my family. I thought maybe he was right. That was 2 days before Amelia made me a suspect in my own life. Back then, I thought the worst thing that could happen was an awkward meal and some passive-aggressive digs about how I never call or think I'm better than this place. And for send. Turns out, the worst thing that could happen was being falsely arrested by your own sister while your mother watched and said nothing. At Fort Claiborne, they don't train you for that. They train you for minefields, not family dinners. They teach you how to spot body language shifts in potential hostiles, not how to read your mom's face when she quietly agrees with your arrest. They teach you how to build intelligence dossiers on foreign assets, not how to process the look on your grandma's face when she realizes her favorite granddaughter just got cuffed in front of the china cabinet. But I didn't need training for any of that. I just needed to keep breathing and remember what Dr. Grant said. You don't owe anyone clarity. You owe yourself peace. So I stood there, back aching, wrists screaming, and eyes dry as the damn desert. No apology. No explanation. Just stillness. Let Amelia burn out her righteous indignation. Let the cousins gasp and whisper and text under the table. Let the photos circle the room, probably posted by now on some Facebook group for retired PTA moms and bored divorcees who live for small-town scandal. Let it all happen. Because the one thing nobody noticed while Amelia was playing cop and judge and martyr was the way I kept shifting my stance. Just a little. Just enough to count seconds in my head. 12 minutes. That's the average response time when a priority signal hits Claiborne's internal routing. 6 to confirm identity. 3 to assign a handler. 3 to move. That number ran in my head like a metronome. And while everyone else in that room was watching me fall apart, I was counting. 12 minutes wasn't long, but long enough to remember what the scars felt like. Not the physical ones I'd buried those under layers of muscle, sand, and discipline. I meant the ones from the year Dad died. When Amelia shut me out, handled the funeral without me, made decisions like I didn't exist, when Mom stopped asking when I'd come home, when I realized the only time I was mentioned in the house was when someone needed a warning for what not to become. Those scars didn't show up on psych evals. They didn't earn medals or therapy vouchers. They just sat there, waiting for a night like this to open up again. And while Amelia thought she was delivering justice, all she really did was confirm what I'd already known for years. This family wasn't mine anymore. The Army never fixed that. But it did give me a place where loyalty wasn't a coin toss, where orders meant something, where truth wasn't whatever made you feel superior at the dinner table. So I stood still, let them watch, let them think I was broken. And I kept counting. I shifted my stance again, slow and natural, like someone adjusting to leg cramps. Amelia didn't notice. She was too busy holding court. "Some of you may think this is extreme," she said, pacing behind the table now like a small-town version of a TED Talk speaker. "But you haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't found what I've found." She tapped the folder again for effect. Uncle Ray leaned over to squint at the papers like he suddenly understood federal documents. He didn't. "I had to make a choice," Amelia said. "Let this continue or stop it now, for all of us." Mom looked down at her lap. I couldn't tell if she agreed or just didn't want to be part of this. Dinner was still technically happening, though no one was eating anymore. Mashed potatoes were going cold. Rolls sat untouched. Someone had poured gravy and then abandoned the spoon midair. It dripped slowly, unnoticed, onto the linen tablecloth. Grandma's linens. The ones she only brought out on holidays. Amelia had hijacked the entire evening like it was her own personal awards ceremony, and the prize was proving I didn't belong. I spotted Cousin Jenna sliding her phone under the table to film. She was trying to look subtle. She wasn't good at it. Someone else coughed awkwardly, probably hoping to reset the tension. It didn't work. Amelia leaned forward, both hands planted on the table. "She's not a general," she said firmly. "She's not even enlisted anymore. Everything she told us was fake. All of it." Then she looked at me. "Well, are you going to deny it?" I blinked once. Slowly. "You sure you want me to speak?" Amelia crossed her arms. "Go ahead. Enlighten us." I looked around the room. No one objected. No one defended me. Even Grandma looked away. Her knuckles were white around the edge of her water glass. "I have nothing to say," I said, clear and calm. Amelia scoffed. "That's what I thought." She turned back to the table, triumphant. Someone at the far end mumbled, "This is messed up." Amelia ignored them. She was back to her performance. "I did what needed to be done," she continued. "You all deserve to know who she really is. The thing is, no one in that room actually wanted the truth. They wanted something easier, a scapegoat, a distraction, a reason to explain away their own choices. I'd become that reason. Convenient. Silent. Distant enough to doubt. And if you pile enough suspicion on someone for long enough, they stop being family. They become a myth. I could have pulled rank. I could have rattled off clearance codes, mission names, field designations, things that would have made Amelia backpedal so fast she'd knock over Grandma's wine glass. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew the truth wasn't for them. It never had been. You don't explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You just let them talk until they run out of ammo. Amelia hadn't run out yet. She shifted gears again. 3 weeks ago, she said, voice dropping to dramatic mode, I received a tip from a private investigator, anonymous source. Said Lillian was hiding government property in a private home. Weapons, Idaho S, classified materials. I verified everything myself. Aunt Maggie gasped again. Always good for a gasp. She had crates, locked, sealed, marked. I have photos, I have timelines, and I have sworn statements. I tilted my head slightly. Sworn by who? Your PI? Amelia's jaw flexed. Don't. I'm just asking, you want the truth out here, right? In Grandma's house, next to the gravy boat? She stepped toward me. You think you can intimidate me because you show up here with your silence and your mystery and your superiority complex? Number, I think you feel small, and you don't know what to do with it. That landed. She took half a step back. Someone cleared their throat again. Jenna kept filming. I looked at Grandma. She was still staring at her glass like she could time travel through it. Then I looked at Mom. She finally met my eyes. And she said quietly, Why didn't you just tell us what you do? I answered honestly, because it wouldn't have made a difference. Mom blinked, but didn't deny it. I could see the gears turning in Amelia's head. She wanted control back, wanted the room to realign behind her. She needed to feel right. So she raised her voice again. I spoke with someone in the sheriff's office. They confirmed you never served under that name. I checked the VA database. Nothing. You've been lying to everyone for years. The sheriff's office doesn't have access to OSDI personnel records. She froze. She didn't know that acronym. Not really. But the people who mattered did. And just like that, I saw the brief flicker of doubt behind her eyes. She thought she'd done her homework. She didn't realize she was working off the wrong syllabus. Across the street, the fake dog walker was gone, which meant the next phase had already started. But here in the dining room, the performance kept going. And I let it. The click of her heels against the hardwood was deliberate now, louder than it needed to be. She moved back to her chair, grabbed something from her side, and turned to the room like she was conducting a damn press conference. Her hand rested on the cuffs again. "This isn't just a family issue anymore," she said. "This is criminal." No one stopped her. Not even Grandma, not even Mom. She took a breath and said it. "Lillian Caldwell, you are under arrest for impersonating a federal officer, fraud, and unlawful possession of government property." Her voice was steady, performed. She didn't just want to arrest me, she wanted everyone to remember the moment she did it. I didn't blink. She came around the table again, motioned for me to stand. I was already standing. She positioned herself behind me, pulled my arms back, and double-locked the cuffs, tighter this time, like she thought I might run. If I wanted to run, I would have done it years ago. I heard someone at the table whisper, "Oh my God," but no one moved. Grandma finally said, "Amelia, you don't have to do this here." "Yes," Amelia snapped. "I do. I do." She took a step forward, pulled out her badge, held it up like it was a crucifix warding off sin. "I'm acting under the authority of the Chesterville Police Department. This is official. I've logged the charges. Transport will arrive tomorrow morning." I turned slightly. "You already filed paperwork?" She didn't answer. "Who signed off?" Still nothing. Of course not. There were no signatures. There was no paperwork. She jumped the chain of command, skipped due process, and acted unilaterally. Because this wasn't about law. It was about power. She wanted to humiliate me, make an example, prove to the people at this table that she was the one in control now. And it was working. Cousin Jenna had stopped filming. Even she looked a little freaked out now. Uncle Ray put his fork down finally. "You're really arresting her?" he asked. Amelia didn't look at him. "Yes." End quote. "For what exactly?" "She's a fraud. I've shown you the evidence." Ray leaned back. "You showed us some papers you printed. That's not evidence. That's homework." Amelia's jaw clenched. "She's not who she says she is," she said again. "And who does she say she is?" I asked. The room went quiet. Exactly. I hadn't claimed anything. I hadn't even told them what branch I served in. Amelia had made the whole thing up from motive to headline, and now she was trying to execute the ending she'd written. Mom finally stood up. She looked unsure, like she didn't want to pick a side. "Maybe we should all just calm down." Amelia turned to her, betrayed. "You're taking her side?" "I'm not taking anyone's side, I just..." "She lied to all of us." "You don't know that," Mom said softly. It was the first real doubt I'd seen in her voice in years. Amelia was unraveling. Not publicly, she was too controlled for that, but I could see it in her eyes. She'd built the entire narrative around the idea that everyone would believe her. She didn't prepare for the silence. She didn't prepare for people not clapping when she dropped the punchline. She didn't prepare for me to just stand there. "You're lucky I'm not calling the news," she said, voice sharper now. "They'd love this story. Decorated officer turns out to be fraud, exposed by her own sister. Think how fast that would go viral." "Then call them," I said. "Let's get some real cameras in here." A few heads turned. Jenna perked back up. Amelia faltered. "Don't tempt me." "You already did," I said. "You just didn't expect the lights to swing back your way." She looked at the cuffs again, like they were supposed to mean something more than just steel and ego. "They're real," she muttered. "Yeah," I said. "So is what you just did. And you better hope it was legal." "Note." She didn't respond. The room felt heavier now. Like everyone finally realized this wasn't just a dramatic sibling fight. This was official, documented, and, if I pressed it, actionable. Grandma cleared her throat again. "Amelia, what happens now?" Amelia didn't answer right away. I'll transport her in the morning, she said. Process her at the station. File charges formally. Then what? I cut in. You send me to trial? You testify? You go under oath with this made-up file? She looked at me. Eyes narrowed. Voice low. I'm not making anything up. I took a slow breath. Okay. That was all I said. Not a threat. Not a warning. Just a single, quiet confirmation that everything from here on out was her responsibility. Not mine. She'd crossed the line. And while she was too proud to see it yet, everyone else was starting to notice. Across the street, a black SUV had pulled up. No lights. No sirens. Just quiet presence. The kind that didn't knock before entering. The SUV stayed parked. No one else noticed it. Everyone inside was too busy looking at me, like I'd finally been unmasked, like Amelia had ripped off some disguise they were all too afraid to question until now. I could feel the shift in the air. No more whispers, no more side glances. Just a slow, collective acceptance that maybe Amelia had been right all along, and that maybe I had in fact brought this on myself. Uncle Ray wouldn't meet my eyes. Aunt Maggie leaned into her wine like it might explain things for her. Even Grandma, who knew better, looked away. She had always been the one to vouch for me when I was gone too long or missed another Christmas. But now, her silence felt like a resignation letter. Amelia stood taller. She fed off it. She turned toward Mom like she needed a final blessing. You know I wouldn't have done this without reason. Mom nodded. Not big, just enough. It was the nod that killed more than anything anyone said. It didn't scream betrayal, it whispered it. I stood there cuffed, body relaxed, face unreadable. And I made a choice. I wasn't going to explain anything. Not to them. Not here. Not in a room where the people who shared my blood were more interested in being comfortable than being right. Amelia walked over to the table and picked up her wine glass like this was the end of something. She toasted no one. Sipped. And then she said, "Okay, let's eat." The room hesitated. Then, like someone had thrown a switch, plates began to move. Food got passed. Forks clinked. The performance was over. The audience returned to their meal. And I stood there in handcuffs while the people who raised me bit into pork roast like this was a completely normal Sunday evening. I heard Jenna whisper to her brother, "Well, at least it's not as bad as Aunt Nora's divorce dinner." He laughed. I didn't. No one offered me a seat. No one asked if I was hungry. No one said, "Are we seriously going to do this with her standing there like a prisoner?" It wasn't shock anymore. It was belief. And the most dangerous kind of belief is the kind built on familiarity. They knew Amelia. She'd been there. She'd taken care of Grandma after her fall, helped Mom through the mortgage fiasco. She'd shown up. I hadn't. I left. I came back a few times, sure, but only when I had the clearance, the time, and the mental energy to brace for whatever cold reception was waiting. I'd always kept it short, polite, distant. And that distance was exactly what Amelia had used against me. You make yourself scarce long enough, they forget who you are. They remember what's convenient. So now, I was the sister who lied, the daughter who faked it, the officer who never was. Amelia had handed them the story, and they didn't just accept it, they signed their names at the bottom. I shifted slightly to relieve pressure on my wrist. Jenna finally noticed. Are those actually tight?" Amelia answered before I could. "They're standard. She's fine." "She's not exactly resisting," Jenna said, her voice smaller now. Amelia didn't respond. She was already reaching for the gravy. I locked eyes with Jenna. Just a second. Enough for her to look away. The moment passed. And just like that, the cuffs stopped being shocking. They just became part of the background. Like the wallpaper, or the crystal pitcher, or the chipped bowl everyone pretended wasn't chipped. My body was saying nothing. But my mind was awake. Counting seconds. Listening for vibrations. The SUV hadn't moved. And that meant one thing. They were inside already. Not in the dining room, not yet, but in the house. Or somewhere watching. From closer than anyone realized. I'd triggered the ping nearly 15 minutes ago. Someone, somewhere in a nondescript office building had read the alert, flagged it for priority, and sent the first wave. Quiet. Observational. This wasn't a movie. No one was kicking down doors. No black helicopters. No shouting. The first move in an internal breach is always silence. Then confirmation. Then presence. And right now, they were confirming. The only real question was who they'd talk to first, Amelia, Grandma, or me. I didn't care. Because whoever it was, they wouldn't come through the front. They'd enter through the gap in the basement Amelia never fixed, or the back porch where the screen door never latched, or the cellar that still had the broken lock Grandpa swore he'd replace before he died. They knew the layout. We always did recon on our own. That's what happens when your career lives inside operations where failure means funerals. So I waited. Let them eat. Let Amelia gloat. Let Mom sip her tea with that blank stare she always used when she didn't want to admit she'd picked the wrong side again. I didn't need anyone to defend me anymore. I'd spent years being the villain in their version of the story. Tonight didn't change that, it confirmed it. But confirmation works both ways. And across the room, behind Amelia's self-satisfied smile, I saw the first flicker of unease. The kind that shows up when you realize the room is too quiet. The kind that means something's off. She didn't know what yet, but she felt it. Amelia was chewing slowly, fork resting against her plate like she finally earned her seat at the head of the table. Her badge was back on her belt, half covered by her cardigan, like she didn't just cuff a family member in front of Grandma's centerpiece. I stayed silent, not just because I'd been trained for it, but because the entire table had already made up their minds. There was no point wasting words on people who only listened to the version of you they wanted to believe in the first place. 12 minutes. That's how long the base response clock usually runs before the next level gets triggered. What Amelia didn't realize was that by cuffing me, detaining me without jurisdiction, and tampering with federal materials all while I was on classified leave status, she'd escalated it beyond family drama. She'd started something she couldn't walk back. I adjusted my weight again, subtle. My left wrist had gone slightly numb. Jenna looked over for a moment, then looked back at her plate. No one was talking anymore. The food was getting pushed around more than eaten. Even Uncle Ray, who usually couldn't shut up about fantasy football, was quiet now. That's when it happened. Not loud, not dramatic. No knock. Just the soft creak of the back door. Amelia heard it, but she didn't react. She probably thought it was wind, or Grandma's ancient wood frame shifting like it always did. But I knew better. They were inside now. And they weren't here to debate, they were here to verify. At that stage of protocol, 1 or 2 agents observe and confirm contact. They enter low visibility, no uniforms, no ID tags, just behavior and body placement. The goal is simple. Figure out whether this is a misunderstanding or a threat. In this case, Amelia had already answered that question for them. She stood, finally, and turned toward the hallway. Grandma? Did you hear something? No answer. She walked 3 steps toward the kitchen, stopped, and squinted, like she was waiting for an animal to dart across the floor. Then a voice spoke from just beyond the doorframe. Male, calm. Ma'am, I need you to put down your weapon. Amelia froze. I don't have a weapon, she said instinctively. You're wearing a service weapon on your right hip, the voice replied. Remove it and set it on the table. Slowly. Everyone at the table looked up at once. What the hell? Ray muttered. Amelia stepped forward. Who are you? Another voice this time. Female. Controlled. We're here on federal authority. Please comply. Amelia reached for her badge. Don't do that, the male voice warned. She hesitated. I watched her eyes shift, trying to process, trying to place the situation in her own mental hierarchy of control. But she didn't have one, because this wasn't her jurisdiction. And suddenly she wasn't the one setting the pace. The female agent stepped into view. Plain clothes, dark jeans, neutral top, clean cut, confident posture. I'm Agent Rollins. You need to disarm. Now. End of. Amelia's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'd seen that look before, a mix of fear and entitlement crashing into a wall called consequence. The kind of look that never appears in a police academy brochure. I didn't do anything wrong, she finally said. Not what we're here to determine, Agent Rollins said. But you are interfering with a federal investigation. The room cracked, like glass under pressure. Yenna gasped. Grandma stood up fast, too fast, and grabbed the back of her chair to steady herself. Amelia looked directly at me now. Her voice dropped into a whisper she didn't realize everyone could still hear. You called them? I didn't respond. Agent Rollins nodded toward me. She didn't have to. Amelia still hadn't disarmed. Agent Rollins stepped forward. Chief Caldwell, last chance. Place your weapon on the table. This is not a negotiation. The silence stretched. Then finally Amelia unholstered her sidearm. She didn't slam it down. She set it there like it might break if she wasn't careful. Agent Rollins looked at me. Are you hurt? No, I said. Do you need medical attention? Number. Amelia tried again. She's not who she says she is. I have files, a PI, evidence. Rollins raised a hand. We've seen the folder. It's already in review. Your private investigation has compromised secure materials. That's now part of the case. Art. Amelia's mouth opened, but she couldn't form a sentence. Agent Rollins turned toward the second agent still out of view and said, Go ahead. From behind the kitchen doorway, the male agent emerged. He held a small black device, tapped once. I heard the magnetic lock on my cuffs disengage with a quiet click. My hands dropped free. No applause. Just silence. And Amelia staring at the empty space where her certainty used to live. I rubbed my wrists, stepped back, and reached for a napkin from the table to wipe the red lines away. Then I picked up a roll. Chewed. Everyone else watched. No one moved. The agents didn't rush. They didn't yell. They didn't make threats. Because people with real authority don't have to scream. They just show up and reset the room. I swallowed the last bite of that roll slower than I needed to, more deliberate than polite. Amelia hadn't moved. Her eyes were locked on the empty cuffs like they'd just undone her entire existence, which, in a way, they had. Agent Rollins remained calm. She nodded once, then turned to face the front hallway. She didn't say anything, didn't make an announcement. She didn't have to. The front door opened from the outside. No knock, just authority wrapped in silence. Boots crossed the threshold. Heavy, measured steps. Not rushed, not unsure. A tall man walked in gray hair, under a black field cap. Sharp jaw, shoulders too square to be anything but career military. His uniform wasn't standard issue. It was dressed-down command wear. Tactical. Efficient. Unmistakable. General Marcus Delaney. 3 stars. Chesterville, meet the chain of command. I stood up straighter without meaning to. My spine reacted before my brain caught up. Conditioned reflex. You don't slouch around Delaney. The room fell silent. Not just quiet still. Even Grandma sat down without realizing it. Delaney scanned the room like he was running an internal briefing in his head, calculating exits, reading body language, clocking every minor threat and detail. Then he saw me and nodded. That was it. A nod from him was louder than any speech. He stepped forward, past the frozen faces, past the untouched plates and barely sipped wine glasses. The only sound was the click of his boots on hardwood. He stopped 2 feet in front of me, raised his right hand, and saluted. Crisp, full, standard. General Caldwell, he said. We've been briefed. Are you all right? The sound of that name hit harder than any accusation Amelia had thrown all night. General Caldwell. Me. My name. My rank. Out loud, in front of everyone. I returned the salute. Measured and clean. All clear, sir. His hand dropped. So did the illusion. The illusion that I was lying. That I'd faked my career. That I was some washed-up fraud playing dress-up with clearance codes. Amelia looked like she'd just seen a ghost. What did you call her? She asked, barely breathing. Delaney didn't even look at her. He turned to Agent Rollins instead. Are we secure? Yes, sir. No threats inside. Civilian materials recovered and logged. Good? He finally acknowledged Amelia. His eyes didn't blink. You're the one who initiated the arrest? Yes, she said. I was acting in good faith. End quote. Good faith, he repeated flatly. Based on information obtained from an unlicensed private investigator, unauthorized entry into a secure storage property, and printed documents stolen from a classified materials container. Amelia opened her mouth, closed it again. This is a breach of multiple federal statutes, he said, and a direct interference with active Department of Defense operations. You've compromised an agent under sealed directive. I didn't know, she said quietly. You didn't ask, he corrected. She looked to Mom, then to Grandma, like either of them could save her from what was coming next. Neither moved. Delaney looked back at me. You still want this handled quietly? I nodded. For now. He accepted that. No questions, no explanation required. That's what rank buys you, not privilege trust. He turned toward the rest of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, this situation is under federal review. What occurred here tonight will be documented and statements will be taken. You are all instructed not to share details publicly, including on social media. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. People obeyed because people always obey someone who doesn't ask twice. He looked back at Amelia. We'll need your service weapon. She didn't move. Rollins stepped forward, took it from the table, cleared the chamber, then slid it into an evidence pouch. Delaney continued. You are to remain in Chesterville under temporary suspension until formal review. Do not leave the county. Do not make contact with outside parties until authorized. But, you were warned, he said flatly. Then he looked at me again. His tone softened by half a degree. I'll arrange escort for transport when you're ready. Appreciated, sir. With that, he turned and walked back through the front door. No ceremony, no drama, just finality. And silence. You could feel the narrative cracking in everyone's minds, like a collective rewriting of what they thought they knew. Amelia didn't speak. Couldn't, because now the facts weren't in her control. I sat back down slowly. Amelia stayed standing, still cuffless, but exposed. She wasn't the one who got arrested, but somehow, she was the one who looked trapped. Nobody clapped. Nobody apologized. Nobody even asked if I was okay. They just stared, as if I'd suddenly become a stranger to them. Not because I'd lied, but because they finally realized I never had. The front door shut behind General Delaney, but the air in the dining room didn't move. It just sat there heavy and still, like nobody wanted to be the first to breathe. Amelia was still standing. Her face was pale, but not the kind of pale that comes from fear. It was the kind that comes when the room you thought belonged to you suddenly doesn't. She looked around, like waiting for someone, anyone, to explain how this wasn't real, that this was just some overreaction. No one stepped in. Not even Mom. Especially not Mom. Agent Rollins remained near the kitchen entrance, one hand resting casually near her hip, not near a weapon, just steady, like nothing happening here surprised her. Because it didn't. This wasn't the first family dinner gone nuclear she'd probably walked into. Rollins pulled a slim black folder from her side bag and placed it gently on the table between the centerpiece and the mashed potatoes. She flipped it open, revealing a stack of glossy photo prints, a few documents with barcodes, and one heavily redacted incident report. She looked at Amelia. We reviewed everything your private investigator turned over. Amelia blinked. And? Do you want the legal version or the plain English? Amelia didn't answer. Rollins continued anyway. Your investigator illegally accessed a federally secured storage unit by misrepresenting himself to a property manager. He breached biometric security using a manual override you were not authorized to know about, let alone exploit. I didn't know he did it at your request, Rollins said sharply. We have the texts. That shut her up. Rollins kept going. He opened classified containers, handled restricted materials without clearance, and took photos of federal assets linked to an active operation. You printed those materials. You compiled them in this folder. She tapped the red binder Amelia had proudly waved around earlier. Then you distributed them unsecured at a civilian gathering. You displayed them in front of minors. You repeated unverified claims in a public setting and attempted to use that as justification to detain a federal officer whose records are sealed under Directive 481B. Silence. Amelia's throat worked like she was trying to swallow something too sharp. Directive what? Mom finally whispered. But no one answered her. Rollins turned the last page. All of this constitutes unauthorized possession of federal property, obstruction of a classified transfer, and unlawful detainment of a government official. Jenna leaned forward slightly. Wait, you're saying Amelia committed a crime? Rollins didn't look away from Amelia. We're saying she committed several. You could almost hear the emotional rug getting yanked out from under the entire table. I didn't know, Amelia said again. I thought she was lying. I thought she was hiding something. She was, Rollins replied. It was her job. The words hit harder than if she'd shouted them. Everyone just sat there, trying to replay the last 20 minutes in reverse, hoping the math would come out differently. But it wouldn't. Because it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a federal offense. Rollins slid the folder back into her bag. Formal charges will be filed pending review. You'll be contacted within 72 hours. That. Amelia's face tightened. You're not taking me in? That's not my call, Rollins said. But for now, you are no longer in charge of this narrative. It was the cleanest cut I'd ever seen anyone deliver in a room full of people who used to call themselves family. She turned to me. Agent Caldwell, do you wish to provide a statement at this time? Number. Would you like to press charges directly? I looked at Amelia. At Mom. At Grandma. At every single face that had watched me stand in handcuffs and said nothing. No, I said. Rollins nodded, no judgment in her expression. Amelia exhaled, like maybe she thought I was doing her a favor. I wasn't. I just didn't need the satisfaction. She'd already ruined herself. Rollins stepped aside. The second agent reappeared, same steady, unreadable posture. They exited without another word, slipping through the hallway like smoke. The door clicked softly shut. Still, no one moved. Not until Ray cleared his throat. So, does this mean dinner's over? Jenna elbowed him hard. Grandma finally spoke. Amelia, sit down. But she didn't. She just stood there, her hands trembling now. Not from fear, but from disbelief. Like she still couldn't process that the room she once commanded had turned against her in under half an hour. She looked at Mom, who gave her nothing. Then she looked at me. I just wanted the truth, she whispered. No, I said. You wanted to be right. That landed harder than any court order. Because that was the truth. Always had been. Amelia didn't want answers. She wanted the narrative to serve her. And when it didn't, she tried to control it. Dress it up. Force it into a shape that made sense to her bruised ego and her small-town badge. But some stories don't bend. They break. And she was the one left holding the shards. The silence turned stiffer when Rollins and the second agent left the house. But nobody stood. Nobody dared to be the first to speak in a room still echoing with the weight of that one sentence. You committed several. Amelia stayed frozen next to the table, like her body hadn't caught up to the consequences yet. Her badge, her literal identity was no longer on her hip, no longer hers. That little rectangle of metal that she used to walk into every room like she owned the place had just become evidence. She finally lowered herself into the nearest chair, the one next to Mom. Not her usual spot. Her usual spot was the head of the table, where she'd started this evening acting like queen of some sad suburban kingdom. Now she looked like a dethroned pageant winner who'd bitten off more than just the sash. And Mom? She didn't move, didn't even glance at her. She just folded her napkin in her lap like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. You'd think someone would try to comfort Amelia. No one did. Not because they hated her, but because nobody knew where to stand anymore. If they defended her, they looked complicit. If they comforted me, they'd have to admit they'd been wrong for years. So everyone just sat there. Grandma reached for the salt like her roast wasn't slowly congealing next to an overturned butter knife. Jenna took another bite of green beans she clearly didn't want. And someone refilled the wine. Amelia broke the quiet. You didn't have to humiliate me. Ender. I didn't even flinch. I didn't. She blinked like that didn't compute. You triggered a federal response, detained a SEALed officer, then leaked classified material to half a dozen civilians and live-streamed the buildup like it was your big moment, I said flatly. Humiliation was your goal. It just didn't end the way you wanted. She looked like she wanted to argue. But what could she say? I hadn't even touched her. Hadn't raised my voice. Hadn't said more than a handful of words all night. The wreckage was entirely hers. She turned toward Mom. I was trying to protect this family. Mom didn't speak. Not at first. Then, quietly, she said, From what? Amelia opened her mouth, but no words came out. You thought she was lying, Mom continued, eyes still down. You wanted her to be lying. She was lying. She kept secrets. Secrets are part of her job, Mom said, still not looking up. But you didn't care about the job. You cared that she didn't answer to you. That broke something. A visible crack in Amelia's posture. She looked away, lips pressed so tight they went pale. It would have been easier if Mom had yelled. If Grandma had cried. If Uncle Ray had thrown something. But they didn't. Because truth doesn't need volume. It just needs room. And now that Amelia was no longer the loudest voice at the table, everyone could finally hear what had been building for years. The fact that I had left this family not out of pride but out of survival. That every skipped Thanksgiving wasn't arrogance, it was damage control. That every silence wasn't distance, it was strategy. That coming home meant exposing myself to a war zone more chaotic than any combat zone I'd ever seen. And now, with her badge gone, Amelia had nothing left to hide behind. She turned to me again. You're not even angry. I met her eyes. You're not worth it. Another cut. Clean, sharp, necessary. I wasn't being cruel. I was being efficient. That's what training does. It strips emotion from execution. And for once, Amelia wasn't the one in uniform. Grandma tried to bridge the moment. Maybe we can all just breathe for a second. I didn't, because there was nothing left to exhale. The damage had already been done. Not tonight, years ago. Tonight was just the paperwork finally catching up. Mom stood up slowly. She reached for her purse, then looked at me. Her voice wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. I'm driving home. You're welcome to stay at my place, Grandma offered softly. Mom nodded, then looked at me, and said nothing. Not a sorry, not a thank you, not even a good night. Just a long pause that tasted like regret but smelled like habit. She turned and walked toward the door. Amelia didn't follow. I stayed seated. Jenna looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. No one else moved. Outside, I heard Mom's car door shut. The ignition started. She pulled away. And that was it. No hugs. No, we'll talk later. No resolution. Just space. Finally, I stood up, walked over to the sideboard, and poured myself a glass of water from the crystal pitcher Amelia had mocked me for buying her 3 birthdays ago. She said it was too fancy for this house. Maybe it was, but I drank from it anyway. The courthouse in Franklin County wasn't built for spectacle. It looked like someone had taken a DMV, a church, and a tax office, jammed them together, and called it civic architecture. Beige walls, worn carpet, bad coffee. It was 8 months after the dinner. Amelia walked into the courtroom wearing a muted gray blazer and her old patrol boots. No badge, no service weapon, just a woman trying to look like the thing she used to be. She didn't look at me when she entered. I didn't expect her to. The room wasn't packed. Just a handful of local reporters, one sketch artist who clearly hadn't wanted this assignment, and the kind of public observers who show up to court the way others go to garage sales hoping to catch something unexpected. The charges had stacked up quietly. Unauthorized possession of federal documents. Obstruction of classified operations. Unlawful detainment of a federal officer. And, maybe most ironic of all, impersonation of federal jurisdiction. She'd argued it down to 2 felony counts and 1 misdemeanor. Her lawyer, a lean man in a wrinkled blue suit who looked like he split his time between DUIs and tax fraud, did most of the talking. I didn't say a word. I was called to testify. I declined. I'd already submitted a written statement. Sworn. Sealed. Enough to make it clear where the law stood. The court didn't need a performance. And I wasn't giving her another audience. From the bench, the judge asked Amelia if she had anything she wanted to say before sentencing. She stood, hands clenched at her sides. I thought I was protecting people, she said. That was it. No tears, no apologies, not even a direct acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just that same loop she'd always lived in, where intention erased impact, and being right mattered more than being responsible. The judge nodded once, unmoved. 12 years. 5 minimum with eligibility for parole. Probation afterward. No firearms. No public office. Mandatory counseling. She didn't cry. I wasn't sure if it was pride or shock, but she just stared ahead, blinking slower than usual, like her brain was trying to record every moment so she could explain it differently later. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. She didn't shake it off, but she didn't acknowledge it either. The courtroom cleared quickly. No one was there to linger. I waited until the hall was empty before I left. As I stepped outside, the sun hit hard spring glare off a parking lot full of old sedans and state-issued license plates. There was no press waiting, no one shouting questions, just air. And it tasted like freedom, not because she was going to prison, but because I wasn't carrying her choices anymore. On the drive back, I didn't play music, didn't call anyone, didn't even stop for coffee. Just silence and road, the kind that unspools behind you like closure. Mom didn't come to court. She'd sent a message through Grandma, tell her I hope this brings her peace. I didn't respond. Peace isn't a gift someone else gives you. It's something you build, one boundary at a time. And the final one had just been laid in federal sentencing paperwork. I got back to the base late that night. Security let me through without comment. Nobody saluted. Nobody asked where I'd been. Because the job didn't care what my sister did, only what I did next. That's how the real world works. The past might make you, but it never excuses you. I logged back into my system, cleared the alerts, and resumed my role. Ops had run smoothly while I was gone. I wasn't missed, and that was exactly how I'd trained my team to function. Dependably. Efficient. Quiet. Later, I found a letter in my on-base mailbox. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Amelia's. Inside was a short note. I didn't know you were really someone. I thought you just left because you hated us. I still don't understand why you never said anything. But I guess that's who you are now. I don't know if you'll ever read this. But if you do, I'm sorry. That was it. No signature. No plea for forgiveness. Just a half-confession scribbled on lined notebook paper like we were back in high school. I held it for maybe 30 seconds. Then fed it directly into the shredder behind my desk. The blades didn't hesitate, because I wasn't here to offer closure. I was here to continue. And not one part of me needed to carry her voice with me to do that. The match flared fast. It caught the corner of the paper before I'd even set it down in the tray. Yellow tongue curling up the edge like it had been waiting 2 years for oxygen. I didn't watch the whole thing burn. Just the start. The handwriting was still familiar tight loops, slanted right, the kind of cursive she used on Christmas tags. The last word I saw before the flame blurred, it was sorry. It didn't matter anymore. That letter wasn't the first. There had been 3 before it, all sent from the Federal Correctional Facility in northern Ohio, each more polite than the last, each one gently rewriting her version of events. Less about taking responsibility, more about shaping memory. The first time, I opened it. The second time, I skimmed. The third, I didn't even break the seal. This one, I burned. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need reminders of someone trying to make amends with words they'd never used when it counted. I wasn't angry. That had faded the same way noise does when you close the door to a room you've already left. 2 years had passed. I'd been promoted twice, transferred once, took on a hybrid role between intel ops and liaison work. More planning, less field, clean hours, sharper suits. Fewer missions that involved sand in my teeth or waking up in third-world bunkers with satellite phones for pillows. Life was quieter, but not softer. Because peace doesn't mean ease. It just means you've stopped bleeding in places no one else can see. Amelia's name only came up twice since the trial. Once, during a personnel security check, and once, when Mom called to ask if I could visit Grandma's nursing home for her 90th. I went. I sat with Grandma for 47 minutes, read to her from her favorite spy novel she didn't know the irony, and promised I'd send her the next one. She asked about Amelia. I told her the truth. She's still alive. That was enough. We didn't talk about the rest. Because sometimes, even at 90, you know which silences deserve to stay untouched. Back at base, my unit knew not to bring up the Chesterville situation. The new officers had no idea. The old ones respected the boundary. That's how you survive in this line of work. You control the story before someone else writes it for you. That night, after burning the letter, I sat on my patio. Simple chair, coffee mug, cool air. I didn't think about Amelia. Not directly. But I thought about how much space we give people who don't deserve the lease. How long we carry ghosts because someone once told us that family means forever, even when the rent's unpaid. She wasn't my ghost anymore. She was just a case file. One that had been closed, logged, and placed in a cabinet I no longer opened. There was no satisfaction in that, no triumph, no vengeance, just release. And that's what made it real. Because revenge isn't always about explosions and confrontations. Sometimes it's just healing in a room they'll never be allowed into again. Sometimes it's letting the letter burn and not needing to watch the ashes. The screen in front of me blinked twice before settling into a secure feed. Intel briefs poured in satellite imagery, encrypted reports, projected patterns across eastern corridors. The war room smelled like coffee, rubber, and silent pressure. I was home. Not the kind you're born into, the kind you build. One clearance code, one threat diffused, one operation completed at a time. Ma'am, incoming from Langley. File tag 4L173B. I nodded. Run it. My voice didn't raise. It didn't need to. The people in this room knew what I was. Not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. I stood at the front of the command table now. No longer the shadow figure behind the briefings. No longer the name buried under layers of sealed orders. No longer someone's sister. Just General Caldwell. Clean. Defined. Respected. 2 junior officers flanked me, both under 30. Both sharp-eyed and cautious in the way people are when they realize they've just stepped into a room where decisions cost lives. The file popped onto the screen. Another surveillance escalation. Possible cross-border movement. Nothing urgent yet. But it would be. It always was. My hand hovered over the digital map, dragging 2 zones into alignment. This corridor's soft, I said. They'll exploit it in 72 hours unless we patch it. Then, yes, ma'am, someone answered, already typing. I stepped back, let the team move. That's the secret no one tells you about leadership. It's not about barking orders. It's about setting systems in motion so well that you can walk away, and they still run smooth. I left the room 20 minutes later. My boots echoed in the hallway. Not heavy, not loud, just present. A junior staffer from logistics passed me in the corridor. He saluted quickly, a little too nervous. General. No. I nodded back. No lecture. He'd find his calm eventually. I reached my office, entered the passcode, and closed the door behind me. Silence. Real silence. The kind where nobody's watching you for weakness, and nobody's about to betray you over pork roast and family pride. I stood by the window. Sunlight cut across the airfield. A jet refueled on the tarmac. Wind caught a loose corner of a tarp, snapping it once, then settling again. Somewhere in a federal facility, Amelia was 2 years into a 12-year sentence. Maybe sweeping floors, maybe working admin, maybe still rewriting the story in her head about how she meant well. Didn't matter. We hadn't spoken since that last letter. No calls. No requests. I'd blocked the number assigned to her facility. Because what was left to say? People always think revenge is about destroying the other person. They're wrong. It's about refusing to carry what they tried to hand you. She gave me shame. I gave it back. She gave me guilt. I walked around it. She gave me accusation. I gave her silence. And in that silence, I built something else. This. A room full of classified intelligence, sharp minds, and clean lines. A world where my name didn't need defending anymore. A knock tapped once on the door. Enter. End quote. It was Colonel Davis, 6 years my junior, competent as hell, and always slightly suspicious that I could read his mind. Ma'am, the SecDef just approved your nomination for Joint Strategic Operations. I didn't blink. Good. We'll need your file finalized by end of week. I'll have it by Thursday. He hesitated. Anything else you need from me? Yeah, I said, walking back to my desk. Find someone else to organize the command holiday party. Last year's playlist nearly ended morale. And Rudy, he smiled. Copy that. The door closed behind him. I sat down, pulled out a fresh yellow notepad from my drawer. Not to write about her. Not to remember. Just a plan. Because this life wasn't built on memory. It was built on momentum. And I had no interest in looking back. Sometimes, the people who share your blood will try to define you by the pieces of yourself they never bothered to understand. They'll mock your silence, question your path, rewrite your choices into stories that make them feel more righteous. But the truth? You don't owe them a version of yourself they can accept. You owe yourself a life you can stand inside with your spine straight, your name intact, and no need to explain it to anyone who lost the right to ask. I didn't need revenge. I just needed out. And now, I'm exactly where I was always meant to be. Not because of them, but in spite of them.